Back with the Victor Davis Hanson show. So, Victor, Donald Trump I saw a clip a little bit ago. He was with Prime Minister Starmer. I guess maybe he's in Scotland still. He said he's talked to Vladimir Putin frequently. He's gotten the impression things would be done. 50 days was a deadline of sorts that Trump gave to settle this. That 50 days is still some number off. And Donald Trump said today, you know what? Putin is not doing anything to advance the peace, and I'm going to give it 10 to 12 days. And by the way, that 10 to 12 days is August 7th to August 9th. What will happen those days, not sure. Anyway, Victor, that's the new background. Your take.
Well, that's a reduction of, remember, the 50-day deadline. You know, in a weird way, this is going to work out for Donald Trump because his MAGA base was restive after the Iran 27-minute or 30-minute incursion and the Epstein flip-flop. But he can legitimately say that he risked a lot of exposure by bending backwards to Vladimir Putin. And that includes the blow-up with Zelensky in the Oval Office with J.D. Vance, etc. So his fides to the base are pretty clear that I tried to do everything I could to get a settlement and be neutral in it when most people in the West thought that he should not have been neutral, that he should have tilted for Ukraine. I'm not going to get into that. But my point is, he's basically saying I'm an art of the deal guy, and you can't deal with this man unless you have cards to play. And I'm not going to give up my cards anymore by saying that we're going to have an agreement. But notice what he also did was really smart. Whereas Biden didn't talk to Putin and call him a killer and a murderer, Trump said, it was very clever what he said. He said, you know, we had great conversation. He was so nice. We got along. And then he killed people right afterwards. And he had said that essentially earlier with Melania, said, well, he doesn't listen to you, he kills people. So he's now can say to MAGA, I did everything I could, and I took a lot of heat. Remember, it was people like John Brennan who said he was a traitor over the NATO thing and then kissing up to Putin years ago. And then Clapper, who is unfortunately back in the news, called Trump a Russian asset, basically called him a traitor. So he had a lot of exposure also, if I could use that term again, from the Russian collusion hoax, that he really couldn't, be a disinterested negotiator with Putin because everybody on the left had fabricated all these charges that he was Putin's puppet. So now the whole thing is now resolved. It's very clear he gave Putin every single chance possible to cut a deal. So then the question is, why didn't Putin cut a deal? And the answer that we've discussed before is he's lost 1 million dead, wounded, and missing Russians. There's stories almost every day in the media about young people who are used as cannon fodder. They only get 2 weeks of training. Our guys get 6 months. They're put in impossible situations. And even though Ukraine only has about 28 million people, Russia has 144, at some point, Putin apparently feels that he has not justified the special military operation in the eyes of the military and the apparat, the oligarchic class that runs Russia. And what that means is they're saying, if I could just ad lib a minute, if I was an oligarch or a Russian general, I'd say, Vladimir, so what have you got for the 1 million dead and world pariah status? What have you got? Just tell me, dead and wounded, 1 million people for the special military operation. What have you got? There is no more Wagner Group. We got rid of them. They were useful. We had Crimea. They were never going to get back Crimea. Maybe you can say that they institutionalized it, but we were never going to give it back. We didn't need this. We were never going to give back the Donbass. And I know that now they said that they promised that Ukraine will not be in NATO, but we knew that. Even the NATO members quietly had contacted us in Russia and said, they're not going to be in NATO. We don't want them in NATO. So what did we get? And Putin's saying, well, I'm 40, 60, 80 miles westward. You got 1 million people for 80 miles? And so the point I'm making is that he has a magical point on the map where he can justify to the Russians that in a cost of benefit analysis, this was worth it. And he's not there yet, he thinks. And he's not going to get there. And then Donald Trump is basically telling the MAGA people, I have to continue to supply them weapons, even though I don't want to, and I want to get this thing over with for 2 reasons. Number one, as I said, I have no leverage with Putin. He does not respect magnanimity. He interprets magnanimity as weakness to be exploited, not kindness to be reciprocated. And number 2, do you really want an Afghan Kabul pullout on my watch? Because if I cut them completely off, Russia's going to go back westward all the way to Kiev. And we're going to lose this, and we're going to get an albatross around our neck, just like Biden did with Afghanistan. So I'm not going to be the guy who lost Ukraine. So that's where we are right now. There's a third thing I should mention. He just cut a big deal with the Europeans. And we can get into that later, but it was a very important deal, and it's all predicated on what he did with the Japanese and South Koreans, and that is that all these people that were running these asymmetrical surpluses, and Europe was up to 250 plus billion with us, I think, or maybe it was 200. The point is that they had a magic profit margin that we didn't even know what it was, but we guessed that if it was 25% tariff, they wouldn't make any money, and it would never work. 20, they wouldn't, but right around 15, they felt, in a cost to benefit analysis, they could pay the 15%, stay in this huge consumer market, invest more money to assemble things here, and still make a profit. And part of that deal was that they came to the table in part because Donald Trump was much more reasonable about NATO. They had called him daddy. They had gone up to 5%. And the last thing that Trump wanted to do after cutting this deal was get back on the bad side of the Europeans and get in a big fight over Ukraine and cut Ukraine off, because that would have destroyed this trade deal. It really would have. So what he's saying now is the Europeans and we and us are good friends on Ukraine and on trade. I will have leverage now to pressure Putin and MAGA people. Just stick with me, because I'm not going to hang Kabul around our necks and be the ones. And that's where he is.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that trade deal, Victor. And here's the headline from the Daily Mail, which this was reported on yesterday, Sunday, the 27th. President Donald Trump announced a sweeping trade agreement with the European Union on Sunday, setting a baseline 15% tariff on European imports, including automobiles, while keeping existing 50% duties on steel and aluminum in place. As part of the deal, the EU committed to purchasing $750 billion in U.S. energy products. Trump announced the agreement during a press conference with the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. The EU will purchase $750 billion in U.S. energy, while also investing $600 billion in America on top of existing investments. Additionally, EU countries will be setting tariffs on U.S. goods at 0%. And Europe agreed to, quote, purchase a vast amount of military equipment, Trump said, end quote. Maybe, Victor, in part, applying, I mean, the deal's a good thing in itself, but the energy thing may be also applicable to the Ukraine situation.
It's going to, part of the reluctance of frackers to expand their product on federal leasing, because Doug Burgum has been really good about it. You know, it's not going to take you 2 years to get a federal lease. I can do it in a month or so. And EPA is the same way. But the frackers are saying, well, you know what? Prices are not all that great now, and we put all this money in it, and we'll have an oversupply. We need markets. So I think part of it is Trump is telling them, we're going to have a huge export, liquefied natural gas export to Europe, and you'll have a steady customer for a long time, and you can make a profit on that. And so that was very important. And then it's part of the idea that Europe, we know, under the table, or in the case of Germany, openly, is still buying natural gas in various ways, methods from Russia. So it's a very good, it's all connected. And it brings up a larger point. You know, Jack, I don't want to beat this horse to death. I know everybody's listening, getting tired of this, but I'm very disappointed in the Wall Street Journal's news, not the op-ed. I really like Holman Jenkins. I love Gerald Baker. I think Kim Strassel's unrivaled. I like them all. I like Barton Swaim a lot. But the news division, when I read these articles, I look at the writers, and then I double click them and see where they came from, and they all come from Politico, Washington Post, and New York Times. And so when you read these, and sometimes the editorial board itself, they can't give him any credit at all. Today there's an op-ed about how bad the immigration, how cruel it is, and what's cruel is letting in 12 million people a year. But this op-ed writer is a guest writer, Neera Tandon, I think her name is. But my point is, when you read the Wall Street Journal, even when there's this great news, they're attacking the European trade thing today. And they're saying, no, it's not such a great deal. He didn't get this. He didn't get that. And when you look at March and April stories, we should be in a recession now. The stock market should have crashed. We should have been in stagflation. Real wages should be down. The deficit should be ballooning. There will be no revenue from tariffs. And then you read the actuality. Scott Basanis he's forecasting $1/3 of $1 trillion in tariff revenue. and job growth is good, and inflation is not spiraling out of control, and it looks like there'll be good GDP. So all of this is good news, and nobody will recognize it. And, I have the utmost respect for my colleagues at the Hoover Institution, whom I've learned about economics for the last 20 years, but all of the economic orthodoxy was that Trump was going to blow up the economy because tariffs are terrible. And what's really strange is, I want to make 2 points very quickly. One is, the same people who are damning tariffs are for secondary boycotts of Russia, which would be effective to pressure Putin. But if you want a trade war and you want to blow up the economy, then you tell India we're going to have zero trade with you. And you tell China zero trade. And you tell Germany zero trade unless you stop every drop of Russian oil. And we know they're getting Russian oil, and we know it's central to their economies. So I can't understand how you can square that circle and say, this tariff 15%, and then, let's have a worldwide global secondary boycott. It doesn't make that will destroy the economy. The second thing is, and I've said this before too, we're on uncharted territory with all these things. I recently listened to something that Doug Burgum said. He suggested that we might have $15 trillion in promised foreign investment. Remember, everybody, everything in Silicon Valley, Facebook, Google, if you count X, all of those places together, Oracle, you name it, $9 trillion in market capitalization. So what we're basically saying is almost double a Silicon Valley will be spread out over the whole United States. What will be the effect of that? If you ask an economist, they have certain formulas that for every $1 billion, you get maybe 500 to 5,000 jobs, not specific, but $15 trillion as far as jobs go is incredible. Especially, we haven't calibrated AI and robotics that are now making quantum leaps. We haven't factored in $1/3 trillion in tariff revenues. We have not factored in, we have 1 million less illegal aliens on state, local, and federal entitlements, and there's going to be a lot fewer. We haven't factored into that equation if you go to EPA, or as I said, Interior, or the Department of Energy, and you want to drill a well, or you want to make a pipeline, or you want to make a highway, instead of 2 years for a permit, you can probably get it in a month or two. All of that has economic ramifications that are, no one knows what they will be, because we've never done it before. No president has ever done this. No president has ever had all these trade deals. No president has both deregulated and cut taxes and had these types of trade deal and this level of foreign investment, or cut government this much. So the only thing I'm critical of is when Trump was pointing out that we could have this huge revenue of $1/3 trillion. He said he would like to think about a tax rebate or tax cut. I wouldn't do that. We have $1.9 trillion trade deficit, maybe $37 trillion in aggregate debt. If he could lower the interest rate by 1.5 points, he would save $1 billion maybe a day, or $1/3 trillion per year. And with another $1/3 trillion for tariffs, he's got $2/3 trillion, and he's 1/3 of the way cutting the deficit. So that's what he should be doing. And if he could cut the deficit in 1 year by $1 trillion, that's an amazing achievement. And that's what we should. I don't think it does any good after you've already assigned tax cuts to give people more rebates.
Yeah. Well, we have a little. I'd like to ask you another uncharted waters matter and something else about where to spend the revenue. But first, Victor, for our listeners and viewers, do you know there were over 200,000 people watching your most recent episode with the great Sammy Wink? That's amazing, and thank all the new people who have come to the show. Victor, two things about uncharted territory. No, one thing is all these tectonic plates are shifting while we have this really deepening fertility and demographic, I think, crisis. And the other matter is where to spend money. We're going to talk about this at greater length on the next episode, but we have just gotten some very grim news about how close the Social Security system is to collapsing. So any thoughts on that before we head into the break?
Well, we were about 2.0 at the millennium during the end of the Clinton and the beginning of the George W. Bush And I don't know whether it was a 2008 recession or the whole climate change AOC narrative that you don't have children, or the bicoastal blue state model that you're an upscale metrosexual, that life is so wonderful and you're so brilliant and moral, you don't need to have children. Who'd want to waste their, life changing diapers or up all night? But we're in a crisis because the latest fertility said it's not even 1.6. We're down to European levels the last few months. It's like 1.45, which is catastrophic to a civilization. It means your population is aging and it's shrinking. And the problem with that is related to Social Security, because then you have a larger and larger pool of older people and a smaller and smaller people who are still in the productive workforce that pay the taxes. So what's the solution? I don't think it's politically acceptable to just raise the payroll tax, which you'd have to do, up to 8 or 9%, given that if you can't deduct the SALT deductions in these blue states, and there are conservative voters in these congressional districts. And when you look at California, it's not very hard to pay 13%, 10%, 12%, plus the 38 federal, plus the payroll. So you're really getting high. So what's the solution? And the solution is you're going to have to, I think, if you look at the number of people who are on the Social Security payrolls for so-called disability, it's gone from 7% skyrocket. And you have people who are not here lawfully on it. And we give Social Security disability to people who say they have attention deficit disorder. So we're going to have to clamp down on that to people who are truly disabled, number one. I say that, I grew up with my mother's sister, Lila, that was living in the house that I'm living. She had polio at the age of 7. They took her to the Shriners Hospital. She had 18 surgeries and it made it worse. They broke every bone in her body and tried to reform them in a straight line. It was a crazy theory. But my point is, I can remember she could not walk. She was humped over, if I could use such a horrible simile, as the Hunchback of Notre Dame. She was so in such pain. She was a wonderful person. And I remember my grandfather having me put her into a wheelchair and going to the Social Security office in Fresno and trying to explain that she was disabled. And they said things like, well, maybe you should get a power wheelchair and she can go get a job and go buy it. It was crazy. It was so hard for her to get disability each year. And the idea you just hand it out now, that's one thing. And then the other people who are affluent, I don't know how you define affluent, $500,000 a year, $200,000, you can come up with an acceptable number. You could say to them, everything that you put into Social Security has been paid back to you, plus a interest on your money of 5%. At that point, you would have to pay a very high tax on it if you were that affluent. And if somebody said, well, that's not fair, it's against the spirit of free market, why should you punish the successful? I agree with that, but come up with a better idea then, unless you think that cutting these people off who are gaming the system on disability. But if somebody said to me, well, you're 71 and you're getting Social Security, and in 3 years, all the money you paid when you were dirt poor will be paid back to you plus 5%. And from now on, after that was a good investment for you, Victor. And from now on, if you want more money from the government to pay out to you when you have a pretty good salary. And I would say, well, how do you know I'm going to have it next year? And there's all these intricacies and complexities, but you could have a tax on it as long as your salary was at a certain level. If it's a choice between me and somebody in East Palestine or Selma, California, who's on Social Security and they're flat broke, and I have to pay a higher tax, if I were to stay at the income, I would be willing to do it to save the system. But my point is, I'm willing to hear anything, but I do not think the idea we're just going to keep increasing the benefits and that's the problem. Everybody's talking about, we're going to give this and we're going to cut this and we're going to give this person that and cut this person's, and nobody's talking about civilizational lessons that you can't keep doing that or the society will collapse from default.
Yeah. The point you make about I'll call them loafers that's disabled, who probably could be able-bodied or working. And I used to be on a housing authority here in Milford, Connecticut, and it was the poor, and then it was the seniors. And then the senior housing became senior and disabled. And what was disabled? Well, a drug dealer, 29-year-old drug dealer.
I'm not in a good
was disabled.
I agree with you. I just got back from, I won't mention where or what what town or what, but when I go to a pharmacy and I get in line to get a prescription filled, I would tell you that 1 out of every 2 people is turned down because their documentation is either fraudulent or multiple, or they're trying to use somebody else's Medi-Cal card. And then when you have 40% of all Californians are on Medi-Cal, and 50% of all births are on Medi-Cal, and you have the highest number of what they call undocumented. We used to have half of all undocumented in California. Then what happens is the system is broke. There was a very funny story last week in the Fresno Bee, and you know what it was?
No.
McClatchy, you know the McClatchy
Yeah,
papers,
McClatchy,
very
right,
left wing. Yeah, very left wing. Sacramento, Modesto, Fresno Bee. They're almost defunct now. That there's no news. It used to be a wonderful newspaper, although it was hard left. But today it's nothing. But anyway, online they were lamenting the fact that due to Donald Trump's deportations and self-deportation incentives, there was not enough people at the local emergency rooms and health centers. And this was very disturbing because people were not getting enough care. In other words, all you American citizens out there, you can go into the ER and you can go to your provider and it's not as crowded as it was. And this is terrible because it means that we're not giving care to illegal aliens.
Right. Giving it to the suckers instead. Yeah.
It's easy to
Well,
be
Victor,
it's been easy to be moral on somebody else's dime or somebody else's health. But, I can tell you that before Biden, if I went to a particular specialist, I won't say what kind of specialist, I would go into the office. There were 3 people in the waiting room, and I spent 15 minutes talking about general health. He gave me 25 minutes, complete thing. Now, you can't find a seat in the waiting room. Most people do not speak English as their native language, if at all. And when you go in there, you get 3 to 5 minutes. And tell me that doesn't impact or influence the health care of citizens. It does. But it doesn't if you're Nancy Pelosi or you're Chuck Schumer or Elizabeth Warren with concierge or federal top flight health care.
Well, Victor, we're going to talk about Dan Bongino. What else? Black on white crime. And we're going to do that when we come back from these important messages.
Are you ready to move easily and independently without pain or stiffness holding you back? Do you want to look in the mirror and see a plumb, hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Discover Native Path Collagen. Made with only type 1 and 3 collagen fibers, the 2 most important types that make up 90% of the collagen in your body. Found in your cartilage, bones, skin, hair, nails, and gut. Type 1 and 3 provide maximum benefits without the need for unnecessary fillers. Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety. Completely flavorless, Native Path Collagen can be added to anything. Coffee, smoothies, oatmeal, you name it. Its peptide formula makes it more bioavailable, meaning it's absorbed more easily and mixes perfectly without clumping. And you can get 3 or 6 packs at a fraction of the price of other brands. Visit getnativepath.com/Victor and start your transformation today. That is getnativepath.com/VICTOR. I personally love the PM Collagen formula with melatonin. It's given me many nights of great sleep, and the electrolyte drink mix for my water at workouts. They are my friends, and I'm sure they will be yours.
We're back with the Victor Davis Hanson Show, recording on Monday the 28th, and this particular episode will be up on the 29th. Hey, Victor, I know you've talked about your own health so frequently, and you are heading to hopefully have the last treatment for your prolonged.
I'm not going to name who my surgeon, but he's very good, and it was just an unexpected bone growth, and then I've had an immune problem, so it's been 7 weeks today. since my surgery, and I've had another procedure in between, but I'm confident always. I have a wonderful wife who says to me, you're going to be fine. One day you're going to wake up and your sinuses are going to be like air tunnels, and you're going to have no pain. You're going to be a renaissance. And then the Eeyore says, oh, I heard, so I can't sleep. I haven't. Oh, get over it. You'll be sleeping like a baby soon.
Well, let's hope. I'll give you two Catholic things here, Victor, and then we'll move on. You know, I was just at that Napa Institute, the big Catholic annual gathering up in Napa. So the patron saint for safe surgery is St. Luke. St. Luke. And the patron saint for healing is St. Raphael, the Archangel.
I did not know the Archangel Raphael. There's 4, right? You've corrected me on this before.
Yeah, Raphael, Uriel, Michael.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think Michael was the one that was supposed to come down to the 7,000 trapped in Hagia Sophia on Black Tuesday, May 29th, 1453. They waited for him, but he didn't come.
Well, he's the one that kicked Lucifer's hiney.
He did, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, and he was a lesser angel. Archangels are lesser than the level that Lucifer was at. But anyway, we're praying for them to take care of you. Now, let's talk about Dan Bongino, okay? Because this is the Epstein story, and this is another Daily Mail story. Embattled FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino revealed he has discovered matters that have, quote, shocked me down to my core, end quote. During his time in office, Bongino shared a cryptic message to his social media in which he vowed to uncover the truth amid mounting criticism of his handling of the Epstein files. He added, "We cannot run a republic like this. I'll never be the same. After learning what I've learned, we are going to conduct these righteous and proper investigations by the book and in accordance with the law. We are going to get the answers we all deserve, as with any investigation. I cannot predict where it will land, but I can promise you an honest and dignified effort at a truth. Not my truth or your truth, but the truth."
And he's talking not cryptically, but directly and explicitly in reference to the Epstein files, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, yes.
So
I don't, and he's also defending himself from unjust criticism from the MAGA base that he had promised a complete transparency, and they didn't do that. We've discussed this before, that we thought that and I think that's been confirmed, that there were people that came in contact with Jeffrey Epstein that appear in his own communications, emails, texts, phone records, or the 2 criminal prosecutions that convicted him. Names came up, Bill Gates, everybody came up, Donald Trump, Bill Clinton. The question is, how many people actually went on the plane down? I guess what I'm saying, there's gradations. Anybody who comes, I mean, the most 170 names means nothing. I mean, you go to the airport and somebody takes a picture of you without your permission, and then it's on the internet. That's happened to me a bunch of times.
Yeah, the thing you mentioned
I was on your cruise once, Jack, if I could interject this.
My cruise, yeah.
Yes, your National Review well-organized cruises. And
Thank you.
You had the speakers, as every cruise does, speak with people, remember? And there was a guy there, and he said, "What do you think about this person? What do you think about this?" And he was recording it. And I didn't know that. And the next thing I knew, he put it on the internet. Victor Hanson, I had dinner with him. He said this and this and that. And I never knew the person. And then the internet people criticized him. But the point is, you can find yourself in those situations all the time. So if Bongino is correct, what he'll tell us is that the following people were more like, these people went to the island, these people were on the airplane, these people just interacted with him, these people had this, to the degree that he can do that without violating privacy or court statutes or court orders. And then let us all figure it out ourselves. Let us all just chase this thing if you're interested in it. But I really do believe that, and I'm not vested with anybody in the Trump administration. I don't talk to people in the Trump administration regularly, or if at all. So my point is, I do think that to the degree there was a conspiracy, Jeffrey Epstein killed himself because he was looking at 30 years in prison as a child molester pedophile, which meant that he was not going to live very long in a state or federal prison. And he used his influence money to, somebody didn't watch him hang himself. And that was
Did you ever appear on any of Bongino's
I did
podcasts?
A couple of times. He's a very good podcaster, but his brand is tough, hard-hitting, uncompromising, kind of investigative potting. And So when he was now a member of the establishment, I think that made it uncomfortable for him, especially that he, of all people, would be charged with complicity in a cover-up, which he threatened to resign, as you remember. And he had a big fight with Pam Bondi. But just if he's asked about it, instead of saying the Democrat